There may come a point where Browns fans look back at today's loss to the Steelers and realize it was the beginning of the end for Kevin Stefanski. I'll explain coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Why this could be the beginning of the end for Kevin Stefanski, this 23-9 loss to the Steelers today at Acrisure Stadium behind me. Also, it's going to be hard to take much of anything away from Dillon Gabriel's performance today. And where do the Browns go from here? Pretty simple question. I think it needs answering. I do want to thank you for being in every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed. And today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. And I'm going to harken back to something I talked about late in the week here at Locked On Browns in regards to Kevin Stefanski, in regards to this matchup with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Listen, he's not getting fired tomorrow morning. He's not getting fired on the bus ride back to Cleveland tonight. I'm not anticipating that. I am not predicting that. I'm not even saying I want that to happen. And I think that's the key thing in all this here is that I think Kevin Stefanski is a good coach when it's all said and done, when he has the right people and players around him. We've seen the success that this team can have when he's in the right situation. He did it early on in his tenure here. He did it in 2023. Despite all the adversity they faced that season, they found a way to get to the playoffs in 2023. And a lot of that had to do with him as a coach and how he kept the team sort of afloat and the messaging inside that locker room throughout that year. But I do think that there's a world, and it feels even more likely with the result today, and now that we're living in it, where the Browns lose this game to the Steelers today, 23-9. Offense, once again, looks atrocious. Offensive line play, awful. We'll get to that coming up a little bit later. And it's another game and another performance offensively that Kevin Stefanski has to wear. Guys, this Browns team has now gone 11 consecutive games dating back to week 13 of last year was the last time they scored 20 points. 11 straight games, or 20 or more points. 11 straight games without scoring 20 points. They are alone in sole possession. I talked about this earlier in the week last week. They are in sole possession of the third longest streak since 2000 of games in a row without scoring 20 points. 11. There's two other performances, a 12-game performance and a 13-game performance that are longer since 2000, but they're solely in third place now after today's game where they only put up 9 points. They're averaging 13.6 points on the season. There's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of context for that. I'm not disagreeing with that at all in the grand scheme of things. But at some point, like, that becomes too much to bear. It becomes too much to just overlook. And the Browns, frankly, like, now they're 1-5 on the season. They lost again in this building to Pittsburgh. They haven't won here in the regular season in 22 years. Those things matter. And so while I don't think Kevin Stefanski is getting fired this week, next week, the week after that, I do think like this sets the stage where we could get to the end of the season. And depending on how things go from here, if they're 3-14 again, if they're 4-13, if they're 5-12 even, if they have less than 6 wins, we could be living in a reality where you get to the end of the season and there's an important question to ask about whether or not Kevin Stefanski is the right man for this job moving forward. If he's lost the locker room or not, if he's the right person to keep leading this team moving forward. And we'll all look back and say it could have started with this game right here today, because the Steelers game matters. It does. And your week 2 of your quarterback, your rookie quarterback that you wanted to, that you were excited about, that you drafted, that you had these great meetings with, that you felt like was part of your future plans in some capacity, that you drafted in the 3rd round. You put him out there, second week, he looked worse. It's not necessarily his fault. Again, we're going to get to that, but he looked worse this week. It looked worse than a week ago. His debut was better than the second performance. On top of that, your team continues to struggle offensively, just in general, and you can't put up points. You can't do much of anything. It was another horrendous performance for this team, and I don't know where that falls, other than at some point the coach takes the blame. I don't know that we're going to get there, but listen, like there was a message sent after that game with the conversations we were having with players in that locker room. Myles Garrett, who I think Myles is always a good barometer for vibes in the locker room with the team, on the team, because Myles is a leader. Myles is one of the faces of the franchise, obviously. And he has his finger on the pulse more than anybody of what's kind of going on in there. He's looked at as a guy who's supposed to sort of keep things moving in a positive direction and keep vibes as high as he possibly can. And so when he comes to the podium tonight and he tells us, he's asked the question, how frustrating is it that you guys kind of keep losing games in the same fashion? And he flat out says, yeah, we keep losing games the same way. It's frustrating as hell. And he's asked about, what did you think about the Steelers being able to kind of just like pin their ears back and get after Dylan Gabriel when they were protecting a lead in a game? And he says, must be nice. Those are direct shots from the face of the franchise telling you that he is at his wit's end. He is frustrated as hell, by his own words, by his own admission, in the way these games are playing out and the fact that the offense doesn't really hold up their end of the bargain. And he's out there putting his body on the line, and the defense is out there working their asses off to try to keep this thing close. This game was at a point where it was 9-0 Steelers, and I tweeted something along the lines of like, it's 9-0, and this feels insurmountable. And as it turned out, I was joking, it was tongue in cheek, but as it turned out, 9 wouldn't have even got the job done. 9 would have been a tie. If they'd only scored 9, if the Steelers had only scored 9 points, this game would have ended in a tie. It still wouldn't have been enough to get a win. Like it's at this point. Any criticisms, any conversations, any finger pointing and saying, what's going on here? Why isn't this working? Is fair game. And I think Kevin would understand that too, because he's the coach of this team. I also think there's some coded language in the way Kevin's even answering questions when it comes to, he's asked about what's going wrong with the offense. Like, is there one thing you can put your finger on? Why isn't it working? And his answers continue to be something along the lines of, we just need to play football better. And when a coach is saying that, when a coach is saying, we just need to be better, that's him telling you that he doesn't have an answer. He doesn't have an answer mid-season that he can just magically clap his hands and it's going to work, or that he can change much in terms of the way that like he's coaching guys. Like that means he's trying things at practice. He's going over things at practice. He's doing everything he can, and it's just not translating on the field. That means the offensive line is as putrid as it was yet again today. He doesn't have a quick fix for that. They just have to play better. And so there's not no reinforcements are coming at this point. There's no way to just fix the offensive line on the fly here. There's no way to make the offense all of a sudden look like the greatest show on turf or something from the Rams back in the early 2000s. Like it's not happening. This is, at this point, Kevin's biggest test the rest of the way, because he has to find a way to navigate this locker room that feels like it's fragile right now and could be on the brink of some dicey situation. When frustration is being thrown around, when the leader of the team is using that word, and there's no way it's just him. And so as the losses pile up, as the offense continues to struggle, assuming it continues to struggle, and maybe they get back on track next week against the Dolphins. That's a game that I circled early on as they could win this game. At the end of the day, we are only through 6 games so far this season. It's the 6 games to start the year that everybody pointed and said that's going to be a tough stretch. So we knew that this was going to be a tough stretch, yes. But at the same time, if it doesn't get better, if it only gets worse, if they're still losing the same way week after week, starting next week against Miami, I don't know that Kevin Stefanski is just blanketly wrapped in bubble wrap and he's totally safe from anything at the end of the year, just because Jimmy Haslam sort of indicated that in the conversations he had back in March at the owners' meetings. I think all bets are off at that point. If he loses this locker room, listen, if he gets to the end of the season and guys are still supporting him and standing up for him and speaking up for him and they still feel like he's the right guy, then yeah, sure. 3-14, you run it back, I guess. But if you get to the end of the season and the frustration is mounted and it's gotten worse, which we're already week 6 in, and that's the conversations that are sort of being had right now in this team with this team, then I don't know that it's just we should just assume that he's going to be back next year. If he loses the locker room, that's the kiss of death for a coach. So it's a tough situation right now. I thought those comments from Myles Garrett were very, very telling. And we'll have to see from here how those things kind of evolve, how those conversations, how that language evolves moving forward in a season that already feels like it's gone down the tubes from a number of different angles, but obviously because they're 1-5 on the season. Speaking of the struggles on offense, Dillon Gabriel did not have a good day today. No one can sugarcoat that. But I do think it's going to be hard to grade him because of how bad the guys in front of him were. We'll talk about it coming up here on the Locked On Browns podcast. You know that saying, look good, feel good? The problem is that most dress clothes only check one of those boxes. They look sharp, but feel stiff, hot, and high maintenance. That's where Mizzen & Main comes in. Mizzen & Main makes classic menswear with performance fabrics, so it's effortless to look sharp and feel comfortable. They actually invented the performance fabric dress shirt over 10 years ago, and now they've been perfecting it ever since. Their shirts are stretchy, moisture-wicking, wrinkle-resistant, and machine washable. No ironing, no dry cleaning. It's the feel of athletic wear, but the look of professional menswear. Right now, Mizzen & Main is offering our listeners 20% off your first purchase at mizzenandmain.com with promo code LOCKEDONNFL20. That's Mizzen, spelled M-I-Z-Z-E-N, and Main, M-A-I-N.com. Promo code LOCKEDONNFL20 for $20 off, And if you'd rather shop in person, you can find Mizzen & Main stores in select states. This episode is also brought to you by our friends at Mazda. And for Mazda's moving the game forward moment, for those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. These are moments that do more than just put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward, I'm just going to highlight Andre Schmidt at this point. He was 3 for 3 on field goals in today's 23-9 loss to the Steelers. Forget about the losing score, though. He even hit a 53-yarder today. And those conversations from early in the season about, do the Browns have a kicker problem? Can Andre Schmidt be the guy? Those seem like eons ago with how this team is playing right now. He was a lone bright spot on the day here at Acrisure Stadium behind me. And he is our moving the game forward moment for this week, which, let's face it, those field goals didn't end up necessarily deciding the outcome of the game, but it's nice to know the Browns finally feel like they can put a kicker out there and get some points on the board. That's about the only way they could score today. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, so I know everyone's going to look at the box score for Dillon Gabriel tonight, and they're going to say 29 of 52, 55.8% completion percentage, 6 sacks, which kind of are telling in their own right, 221 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, and they're going to say, well, this guy stinks. He's not the guy. I've seen people commenting that already, I think that's premature, and I think that's misguided. Listen, today's game was 90%, I feel like, on the offensive line. Like, that group is a disaster. And there's no, I can't sugarcoat it. There's no other way to put it at this point. They were horrendous again today up front. They did not protect Dillon Gabriel whatsoever. He had minimal time to throw. The Steelers were taking away a lot of the short routes and the quick reads that made Dillon allowed Dillon to be successful in London last week against the Vikings. There just wasn't a lot out there for him. And I do think that he showed some poise in certain spots. First of all, getting hit 15 to 16 times today, 6 of those being sacks. He kept getting back under center. He kept throwing the football. He kept trying to make plays. I think he proved, at least today, more than anything, that he was tough as hell. And I also think there were some moments where you were like, okay, that's the Dillon Gabriel that you kind of expected to see taking that next step in week 2. Some really nice reads where he's throwing the ball over the middle of the field. Jerry Jeudy was his go-to target today. 13 targets to Jerry. He only had 5 catches. There were a couple more drops on his stat sheet, on his ledger, and on the ledger for a lot of these guys on this roster today. I think I saw the final stat was like 4 total drops today. Harold Fannin had one. He ended up leading the team in receptions with 7 for 81 yards. So listen, he again was failed by those around him. The offensive line, the receivers dropping passes. His best pass of the game, honestly, was this rollout play to his left with some pressure in the pocket, and he dropped a beautiful pass to Harold Fannin Jr. racing towards the far sideline, or the sideline rather, in like a bucket. He was wide open. It was a great play, and Fannin dropped it as he got close to the sideline, and it would have been a big first down and set the Browns up in the red zone where they could have maybe scored a touchdown when the game, by the way, was still in hand. They were only down 10 points at that point. Like, it was a beautiful play. There was some of those flash moments for him where I was like, all right, that's what you kind of expected to see from Dillon Gabriel. But I think but at the end of the day, like, if you're going to sit down and rewatch this game back, if you're somebody who likes doing the analysis on quarterbacks, and I know I certainly go back and watch these games all over again as well, and I do the all 22 thing. Like, it's a hard game to really grade Gabriel, all things considered, because the offensive line play was so bad, and he really didn't have a lot of time, and he really wasn't able to do much and feel comfortable and get comfortable because there was constantly pressure in his face. Again, going back to what I said first segment, there's no quick fix for this group, and it's gotten worse because Cam Robinson, who was the 4th starting left tackle for the team this season, left this game with a knee injury, and obviously it didn't. Stefanski wasn't really willing to share if it was a serious one that's going to cost him the season or along those lines, like how long it could be for him. But even when he was out there, Cam Robinson struggled. He had 3 penalties called against him in this game, so that's not great. Like, the same issues, different week for the Cleveland Browns on offense and in the trenches on the offensive line. And I understand Dillon was not perfect. There were certainly some times, and I've seen people throwing this in the comments section, like, he did overthrow some guys at times. I think there's still some miscommunication issues. He threw a pass right to Isaiah Bond that hit right off his helmet, and that one felt like it was more on Isaiah Bond, and that's where the communication stuff comes into play. He just wasn't ready for the ball. Like, that stuff can't happen. And from what I've been told, I have to go back and watch the TV view of this. The TV view at home, I think, captured Jamari Thrash actually, like, getting on Isaiah Bond about that play. And so that goes back to what I said at the top of the show. That's the type of stuff, like the infighting, the things happening within the team, the dynamics and guys getting on each other, and that stuff sort of playing out in real time. Those are the things that can lose you a locker room. But to go back to the topic at hand here, it's not that I thought Dillon Gabriel was great. I also didn't think he was set up for a lot of success with the way that this offensive line played. And so I think it's a hard performance to grade overall. And I think that would have been the case, by the way, if Shedeur Sanders was out there, because I think he would have been under duress all game, and it wouldn't have really been a fair evaluation process for him either. Any quarterback that was back there would have struggled probably today because the offensive line played so poorly. And they played poorly in the run game as well. The run game, which was supposed to be the strength of this team, Quinshon Judkins continues to just get better and better and better week after week after week. He had 12 attempts for 36 yards today, which, by the way, how did he only have 12 attempts in this game? That's the other part of this conversation too, and this part does fall back on Stefanski yet again. The play calling being a 52-17 discrepancy in run to pass, and 12 of those going to Quinshon, who's your lead back. Only 12 carries in this game for 36 yards and 3 yards per carry average. Like, that stuff can't happen. This game was never, like, so out of reach that you had to just abandon the run entirely, and I don't quite understand why that sort of played out that way. But it is not a winning formula. Dillon Gabriel is not going to magically, especially in his second start, turn into like Patrick Mahomes and just be able to, like, backyard football his way around the field. 52 times they threw the football. He works best in the structure and the flow of the offense, going through his reads, making quick, sort of having quick progressions and place it up where he can just get the ball out quickly and have those easy sort of outlets to get the ball to. I think, and the things the Steelers are trying to take away today, I get that. But, you know, even in the moments where he was looking pretty solid in the pocket, like, there was just too much on his plate, and in terms of, like, how many times they asked him to throw. That's not how this offense is going to win football games, and I don't think it's how you really want to run an offense with Dillon Gabriel in it. And so that's an egregious mistake as well. But for me, most of today's failures on the offensive side, as has been the case, I think, for much of the season, fall back on the offensive line play and how atrocious that group is. And as I said first segment, Kevin's standing there and saying there's not one thing he can point at and say this is the answer or this is the biggest problem, and him basically telling you, or him, and then him saying we just need to play better. That's him telling you that there's no quick fix. That's him telling you that he doesn't necessarily think the offensive line is just going to be amended here during the season in a way that's meaningful and it helps produce winning football and a quality offense for this team. It's rock bottom right now. Like, this is as bad as it could be for this offense. And the hopeful thing is that on the other side here, coming down the pike next week, is a Miami Dolphins team that you feel like you can compete against. But that Miami Dolphins team scored 27 points today. Do I feel confident that the that the Browns are going to get to 27 points if they have to against any team at this point? No. Again, 11 straight games without scoring 20 points in a game. That is brutal. And that's as egregious as it gets for Kevin Stefanski, who's the architect of this offense. It's all bad right now, and it all starts with how the offensive line is so ineffective and one of the worst groups in football right now in the way that they're playing. It's a mess. And so I do understand, like, Gabriel did not have a good day, but I don't know that this should be like some nail in the coffin sort of performance where it's like, well, he ain't it, and we should just be making those drawing those drastic conclusions when he really wasn't getting much of anything in the way of protection up front in the trenches along the offensive line. I mentioned that Dolphins game next week. I think that's a nice segue into where the Browns go from here. And there's a lot of questions that need answered. There's a lot of things wrong with this team right now. We'll try to decipher what's next and where they go from here coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast. This episode is brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. They have over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting on projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts fast for a project? Supply House is next-day delivery, which means if you have a project that cannot wait, and listen, I'm a homeowner. I get it. Sometimes these things pop up out of nowhere at the most inconvenient times. I know how this goes to a T. Guess what? That next day delivery is a game changer because you know that the parts will be at your house the very next day. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and dedicated support lines. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHNFL5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. Of course, today's episode is also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL season well underway at this point, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready to kick off with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. There's nothing better than following the NFL season with FanDuel. I can attest to this. And the best part is they have options for whatever type of bettor that you might be. Maybe you're a prop bet person. You want to bet on, I don't know, Dylan Gabriel to eclipse 250 yards and a touchdown next week against the Miami Dolphins. Maybe you're dreaming big here. Or maybe you want to combine Gabriel's benchmark that I just mentioned with a few other props, maybe even throw a money line on there and build a same game parlay. Or you can just keep it simple, jump on the money line in real time as the action unfolds. The options are endless, and it makes every game, whether your team is playing or not, even more exciting. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, so we wrap this conversation in general, I think, just trying to assess where the Browns need to go from here. And it's a complicated question because, as I said, Kevin Stefanski doesn't even have the answers for you. And he's the person that's sort of looked at to have those answers, but there's nothing he can really do at this point. It's a mess. Listen, you got the Dolphins coming in next week. That Dolphins team is not a very good team overall. As we think about this schedule, this is a game that I always felt like the Browns had a chance to win. And really the next two, because I didn't know how New England was going to be. I can't even remember if New England won today or not. They did. 25-19. They beat the New Orleans Saints. So, like, that New England team seems to be better than expected. But this next stretch of the schedule is where things were supposed to sort of turn in the Browns' favor a little bit. You get a bad Dolphins team in here that's going through some turmoil of their own. You get the Patriots, who seem to be sort of leveling out to being a pretty solid team overall, I would say, at least. You get the Jets after the bye week. Like, that's like a must-win game. To lose off the bye week to that Jets team would be an absolute colossal. I mean, that is inexcusable. Can't happen. Cannot happen. You have to beat that Jets team if you're the Browns. And if you're Kevin Stefanski, maybe coaching for your job down the stretch of the season, that game is pivotal. So it's not that, like, there is still a runway where this thing levels off and you can find some wins and still get close to, what was the win total? 5.5 when the season started. Maybe you can get there. Maybe you can get to 4. Maybe you can get to 5. Hell, maybe you can get to 6 potentially if things really start to turn around. I just think at this point, it's hard to project out that this team, and by the way, right now, they are on the their sort of projection for a win total. If you're just doing this thing based off of like expected to win games, it's at 3. It's the same as last year. It'd be 3-14, just based off of how many games they played, how many games remain. And so, like, I don't know that there's like light at the end of the tunnel here, but you hope that week to week things get better, that Dylan can play better, that the offensive line can sort of figure things out. But I'm telling you, like, when Kevin Stefanski's answers to questions on this is just, we just need to play better, that's not a good sign. That's not a good sign that things are going to get corrected and fixed, and it's going to look any prettier than it did today. Even as the schedule probably lightens up a little bit here, and you start playing some opponents that you are probably more level with in terms of trying to compete with them on a football field. So like in terms of where they go from here, they got to figure out whatever they can, whatever iteration of the offensive line works best, first and foremost. They got to continue to get Dylan Gabriel comfortable. They got to get this run game going. Quinshawn has to be the focal point of the offense, as we know, and running the football has to be priority number one if anyone's going to have success. And the defense has to keep doing its thing and keeping them in games. Injuries were a problem today. There was a number of guys that got hurt and left. Surprise, surprise. Jack Conklin left this game with a concussion. That's not a good sign, obviously. I had a lot of people tweeting me like, water is wet and Jack Conklin gets hurt. Like it's sort of just how it goes at this point in his career. It's unfortunate, but that's another offensive line injury that you're going to have to sort of combat here potentially if he's out for an extended period of time. There's no easy answer at all. You just got to hope that things kind of start trending in a better direction, and that as the schedule lightens up, you can compete a little bit better, because this first 6 games admittedly was a gauntlet. But I don't know that any of those fixes are coming till the offseason either. And that's probably the biggest problem right now is that you just don't, there's no like end in sight, and you'll go into, the Browns will go into every single game the rest of the season and be expected to probably, like, they'll be expected to lose. Like it's just going to be the way that it is. I'd be surprised. Maybe the Jets game they're favored, but you're a team that hasn't scored 20 points in 11 straight games. Like, who's having confidence in Vegas to make the Browns a favorite in any way, shape, or form? I do think the defense continues to be the bright spot, obviously, and they continue to keep the Browns in games as long as they can. The offense just lets you down, and that's obviously what Myles Garrett gave credence to. I actually thought too, Tyson Campbell, new cornerback they acquired in the Joe Flacco trade, or no, not the Joe Flacco trade, the Greg Newsome trade, played pretty well today. He was like step for step with his man pretty much every time in coverage. Even DK Metcalf had like one big catch on him for 25 yards, and he did get beat on a double move by DK Metcalf. But even on the great 25-yard catch, like, it was just a perfect ball from Aaron Rodgers. There was no defense that could have stopped it. So yeah, I just, you want to know where they go from here. It's kind of me pointing at Kevin Stefanski and saying what he said. They got to play better. And I don't know that this stuff gets fixed. Penalties were an issue again. And untimely penalties, like at the worst possible times. They get the Steelers off the field, and then they rough the punter and give him a first down, or ran into the punter, gave him a first down, and then the Steelers go down and put some points on the board because of the sort of free extra drive there. It's stuff like that cost you in this league. And the Browns are making the plays that cost you, are committing the plays that cost you more than actually executing those plays that win you the games, the margins in the NFL level. I don't know if that changes. I think the plan from here needs to be, again, continue to find out what you have in Dylan Gabriel, at some point figuring out what you have in Shedeur Sanders, and making Dylan as comfortable as a quarterback as you can behind an offensive line that is just brutally embarrassing and bad. And that, again, it all goes back to what I said. Like, from here, what happens? Do things crumble? Is there infighting in the locker room? Do things start to sort of come out about how players feel, and that they're not happy with the current situation, or how things are playing out, or whatever? And does that stuff start to leak? Once you start getting leaks, once you start getting the cracks in the foundation, it's game over. And after a week where, I don't even think I mentioned this first segment, like after a week where you had 2 trades for 2 guys that meant a lot to this team. Joe Flacco was the backup quarterback after getting benched, but he was also still the guy, a guy that was considered a leader in that locker room. Now he's gone. He's just gone like that. He was a captain on this team. Greg Newsome, people have called him a glue guy. Now he's gone. those types of decisions can sometimes alter the entire aura and vibe in a locker room and send things spiraling. And then you lose again to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the fashion that they did, in the same way they've lost so many games this season. It's a pretty rotten situation right now. And the only hope I can give you is you got a Dolphins team coming in that's also not very good, dealing with their own situation with their coach, who is on a hot seat himself, and could be maybe the first coach even fired during the season at some point this year. And that maybe that helps you get things back on track. Maybe that's a game where you can get Dylan Gabriel playing with even more confidence, and then he can start rolling a little bit and making some more plays as he learns in this league. But you're kind of hoping and wishing and praying at this point, if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, for things to just kind of turn around. This is about as bad as it could be. Like, I called the offense with Joe Flacco rock bottom. I still think that's probably true. By the way, Joe Flacco actually had a pretty good game for the Bengals today and almost pulled off a pretty crazy comeback to beat the Packers. He scored 18 points with the Bengals in the second half, which is more points than the Browns have scored this season, for what it's worth. But regardless, I digress. The offense was rock bottom with Joe Flacco, but right now, like, they're maybe, after the Vikings game, I felt like they were certainly a step above rock bottom, but today was about as bad as it gets. Like, this was right back to the bottom of the barrel in terms of how bad things could go. And I think it all starts up front. But there's no easy fixes. There's no quick fixes here with this team. They're just going to have to figure it out, like Kevin Stefanski said. And I don't think that bodes well for a team winning many games this season, when you just kind of have to throw your hands up and say, I don't have any answers. I don't know. We'll see. But a lot of interesting stuff coming out of this game, post-game and otherwise. And I do think it sets the tone for the rest of the season and could be an important inflection point in what happens with the Browns moving forward in the future, and certainly maybe and potentially what happens with Kevin Stefanski in the future, as well, as the season just kind of keeps on rolling here. He's got 11 games to go to keep this thing together. We'll see if he can pull it off after a tough loss to the Steelers today. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me, as always, to talk about your favorite football team and react here in real time from Pittsburgh. I'll have another episode for you tomorrow. I always like to do sort of a follow-up episode. I'll sit down and watch the game back tomorrow a little bit and have some thoughts for you. We'll talk to Kevin Stefanski as well tomorrow in his sort of post-mortem press conference. If you like what you heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day, wherever you get your podcasts, and at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. And for your second listen, you can always check out Locked On NFL twice a day, wherever you get your podcasts, and at the Locked On NFL YouTube channel. I also like to remind you to keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs. Their season's just around the corner, and they're supposed to be a really, really good team this year. So if you're looking for something to get excited about, the Cavs are there. Plus Locked On Guardians, who are in off-season mode, but you can still find them as well. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See ya.